Hello, this is Fred Haight speaking, and welcome to a series of presentations entitled, What is Classical? What exactly do we mean when we say something is classical? These days, the term classic gets bandied about loosely in referring to classic cars, classic rock, or classic just about anything. Though the terms classic and classical are often confused, classic does at least refer to something that has survived over time. But have these so-called classics really truly survived the test of time? Most of them were created within the lifetime of people who are still alive today and who pass on their values or lack thereof to their grandchildren. Do they then represent a true classical principle or mere nostalgia? To truly pass the test of time, great art must survive for generations, long after anyone is alive who can remember its creation. Long after both nostalgia and memory have not only faded, but passed. Great classical art has an uncanny ability to reach out over centuries and move our hearts and minds as though the artists were standing right next to us. Though great art originates as a pointed and specific intervention into an urgent and burning matter of its own time, it also has a universal quality to it that allows it to live on. But surviving the test of time is not what defines a great work of art, it's a byproduct of it. We need to look deeper and discover what is it exactly about a work of art that makes it great, that makes it classical, and allows it to survive the test of time. In order for great art to invoke the passion that it often does centuries down the road, there is something about it that has to be truthful. It may shock you to hear me speak of truthfulness in art, a field in which nowadays people often believe that artistic expression depends on just however the artist felt about him or herself in the world that day. So do not be too surprised if in the first approximation of attempting to identify this universal classical principle, I do not draw on the greatest artist, but two of the greatest scientists, 17th century astronomer Johannes Kepler and 20th century biophysicist Vladimir Vernadsky. Vernadsky insisted that science could only make sense of this planet that we live on, the Earth, if we realized that it was divided into three distinct spheres operating at different levels. At the lowest level, the abiotic or non-living, such as rock, which occupies perhaps 99% of the volume of the planet. Above that is the biosphere, the planet as determined by the living, which is much smaller, perhaps only occupies 1% of the volume of the planet, and pretty much limited to its surface, but it does operate at a higher level. It's not controversial to say that the living operates at a higher level than the non-living. Simply examine the difference between the way catalysts and enzymes function, and you will see it. But Vernadsky's concept of the third and highest level, even though it occupies by far the smallest part of the planet, the noosphere, the part of the planet determined by mind, was and remains controversial. Here you see a geothermal plant in Iceland. Most of the island is powered by geothermal energy. Environmentalists regard this as a beautiful thing, and so do I. But bear in mind that Iceland only has a population of about 1/3 of a million. Here is one of the largest nuclear plants in the world, the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant in Ontario, Canada, which I also regard as a beautiful thing, and bear in mind that Ontario has about 42 times the population of Iceland. Is geothermal energy natural and nuclear energy unnatural? Nuclear fission is perfectly natural. Man could never force the atoms to split that way unless they were designed to do so. But it's a form of natural energy that no animal could ever develop. It awaited man to discover. It was sitting there waiting for man to discover. Today we hear repeatedly that the scientific accomplishments of man are bad, unnatural, and even destroying the planet. What does all of this have to do with music and classical culture? Everything. Let us shift our attention to 3 centuries before Vernadsky, to the great astronomer and musical theorist, Johannes Kepler. Kepler rejected the ancient notion that the orbits of the planets could only correspond to perfect circles, since that was the most perfect form and it's the only thing that God would have chosen. In discovering that the actual nature of the planetary orbits was elliptical, he was the first person to establish a system whereby the behavior of the planets and the theory accounting for that behavior were not two wildly separate things. For the first time, theory and physical reality were united. Kepler took a similar approach to music. For a long time, it has been assumed that the musical intervals could only be determined by rational numbers, fractions, since they were the most pure numbers and the only ones that God would have used. Those ratios were supposedly discovered on the monochord, although I can't help thinking that they may have been imposed upon it from a preconception. Those ratios were off, just like the circular planetary orbits were off. They just simply didn't work, and they led to huge problems in composing actual music. Kepler put music on a rigorous basis every much as he put astronomy on a rigorous basis. How on earth did he do that? The origin of the discovery was relocating the actual cause and source of musical beauty. A quote from Book 3 of Kepler's 1618 Harmonies of the World. It is mind which shaped human intellects in such a way that they would delight in such an interval. All souls, spirits, and minds are made in the image of God, and therefore delight in the proportions that he had used in creation, and employ the same in their own functions. Kepler recognized that the cause of the intervals, the cause of music, would have to lie in what 3 centuries later Vernadsky would call the Noosphere, the realm of that determined by mind. Kepler insisted that the cause of the intervals had to be found in the mind of God. Well, how do you measure that? You won't find it in a religious book. None of them discuss music in any great depth. Does it mean that music is then freed from all physical basis? Absolutely not. Kepler insisted that you had to find a physical basis for music, but it had to be at a higher level than what Vernadsky would later term the abiotic. For Kepler, you could only discover the mind of the Creator at the level of his highest creation, the universe. Kepler was convinced that the Creator would have made the universe according to the same proportions and harmonies as music. The universe certainly does display an order and beauty that is anything but random and chaotic, though you might have a hard time getting astronomers to agree on that. Kepler investigated the part of the universe best known in his day, the solar system. He spent 25 years looking for that harmonic correlation and didn't really know where to find it. He just knew it had to be there. But when he did find it, it was with remarkable accuracy. He proved that the universe acts as if according to a plan. Kepler's discovery of the musical harmonies in the solar system did not just reinforce existing musical theory, it changed it. The expression of the intervals as rational numbers as ratios according to the division of a vibrating string on a monochord are appealing. They're beautiful. They're ordered. They're not unreality. They are what the Apostle Paul would call as seen through a glass darkly. They are distortions of the true values, which are determined at a higher level. The clearest reality is always seen at the highest level of the noetic of mind, and is distorted as it is projected downwards into the lower levels. It doesn't originate at the lower levels. Kepler's relocation of the cause of the intervals to the level of mind implies what is known as the necessity of the well-tempered system. That's too complex to go into right now. I will in the future. But let us say that it involves mind altering those intervals, not arbitrarily, but according to scientific discoveries about the laws of the universe. Kepler wrote that it might take 100 years for a composer to come along who could implement his ideas in music. And indeed, it was 104 years after the publication of his 1618 Harmonies of the World that J.S. Bach proved the necessity of the well-tempered system, which had been known before, but he proved it through composition in his 1722 well-tempered clavier. Kepler's notion of the classical is extremely important for us today. We live in a pessimistic age in which it is generally assumed that the universe is governed by randomness, chance, and chaos, and that man is essentially bad. How often do you hear that man is the most dangerous animal on Earth? Whereas Kepler, in proving that the universe acts as if according to plan, wished to establish a goodness within it. A goodness within the universe, within its creator, and most importantly, within our own soul. For Kepler, man was not the most dangerous animal, but potentially the highest good. Let us end this part of the introduction with a prayer of sorts. May we bestow upon our children and our grandchildren a gift of beauty, a gift of hope, a gift of goodness, the very goodness that lies in the universe, its creator, and in their own souls. A gift of creativity that is not restricted to the chosen few, but is the property of every and each one of us. A gift of music from Kepler and from Bach. I will end with this beautiful chorus by Joseph Haydn that expresses the idea of Kepler so profoundly that the universe itself tells you about the nature of the creator and his creation, and doesn't matter what religion you are, that universe is the same for a Muslim, a Jew, an atheist, an agnostic, or a Christian. And the words are, the heavens are telling the glory of God. The wonder of his works displays the firmament. The heavens are telling